On the 12th of December last year, two Myanmar journalists working for the Reuters news agency, Wa Lone and Chio So-o, travelled to a restaurant in northern Yangon to meet two police officers. They never came home. They were arrested and later charged under the Official Secrets Act for allegedly obtaining confidential documents. They're being held in a jail in Yangon. Tonight, Reuters have published what they believe was the real reason for their journalists' arrest, an investigation that focused on the village of Indin. The violence that took place here in late August and early September last year was echoed across parts of northern Rakhine State. These before and after satellite images show the extent to which the Rohingya part of the village was burnt to the ground. Only the Buddhist area to the top left was spared. But what Reuters claimed to have found was even darker. Their journalists had been told by a number of sources that 10 men had been picked out from a crowd of Rohingya Muslims, including fishermen, shopkeepers and students, and executed. Reuters claim after a day of interrogation that they were led into a wood. Reuters say these images that the agency has published tonight were given to their journalists by a local Buddhist. We've decided to blur part of this graphic image. It shows the 10 men in a shallow mass grave. You can identify many of the men by the clothes they're wearing. Reuters journalists were told by the man who dug the pit that 8 of the men were shot by soldiers and 2 were hacked to death by the villagers. Back in Myanmar's capital Naypyidaw, at around the same time as the journalists' arrest, Myanmar authorities were themselves looking into the execution. On the 10th of January, the military announced on its Facebook page that they'd undertaken their own investigation and that soldiers and local Buddhists had indeed taken part in the killings. But the military were forced to kill the Bengali terrorists, they said, because police stations were being attacked by Rohingya militants and it was unsafe for them to transport them. A decision was made to kill them, says the military statement. But Reuters say that Buddhist villagers their journalists interviewed reported no attack by a large number of insurgents on security forces in Indin, or that the 10 men had any connection with terrorism. The news agency claims their journalists also gathered unique evidence of military involvement in attacks on Rohingya Muslims, speaking to not only local villagers in Indin, but police officers and members of the paramilitary. One man who spoke to the two journalists described finding 4 Rohingya Muslims hiding in a haystack. One of the men had a mobile phone. The soldiers told him to do whatever you want to them. And so I started hacking him with a sword, he said. A soldier shot him when he fell down. Reuters has cross-referenced testimony from Buddhists on the ground with Rohingya refugees over the border in Bangladesh. Newsnight is unable to verify the claims made by the agency, but Reuters claim that their account marks the first time soldiers and paramilitary police have been implicated by testimony from security personnel themselves. It's clear incarceration is taking its toll on Wa Lone and Chio So-o and their families. Reuters believe that the evidence the journalists obtained is the real reason for their arrest, but the Myanmar authorities are continuing to pursue charges against the two journalists. Will telling this story help Wa Lone and Chio So-o? We'll find out in court.